All right, so you're ready to really dive deep into building security into your software development
From
process?
the ground up, right. Not just like adding it on as an afterthought at the end.
Exactly. And I think we've got just the thing for you today. We're looking at Chapter 10 of Secure and Resilient Software Development,
Which focuses on a methodology called CLASP.
CLASP,
Yeah.
short for Comprehensive Lightweight Application Security Process.
Now, you're probably familiar with OWASP, the Open Web Application Security Project.
Here.
Well, CLASP is one of their offerings. It's a treasure trove of practical resources.
What I find really interesting about CLASP is that it's not like a rigid set of rules. It's designed to be very adaptable, which is perfect for someone, who values efficiency and wants to build knowledge quickly. I'm curious, though, what makes Class P stand out from other security methodologies?
That's a great question. What's fascinating about CLASP is that it recognizes that one size fits all rarely works in the real world,
Got it.
especially when it comes to software development.
Right.
You have your own unique processes, your own workflows, even your own team dynamics.
Absolutely. So how does KLSP address that need for flexibility while still providing a solid framework for security?
Well, it provides a set of predefined process elements. Think of them as building blocks
Hmm.
that you can integrate into any SDLC.
Okay.
So it doesn't dictate how you do things, but it offers guidance on what needs to be addressed
I see.
throughout the development lifecycle.
So it's like a toolbox of security best practices that you can pick and choose from.
Exactly, based on your specific needs.
Okay.
And the beauty of it is that it's freely available, open source.
That's fantastic.
You're not locked into an expensive proprietary solution.
I'm sure that resonates with a lot of our listeners, especially if you're working in an environment where budgets are tight.
Absolutely. And, one of the things that makes Kelis SP so practical is that it breaks down these complex activities into smaller, more manageable components.
Mm.
It's kind of like a recipe, if you will.
I like that. Break it down for me. How does this recipe approach work?
Well, each component is linked to a specific role within the development team.
Okay.
So it's not just a vague list of things to do. It actually tells you who is responsible for what at each stage of the process.
That makes a lot of sense. So it helps avoid confusion and ensures that everyone knows what their role is
Precisely.
in building secure software.
And it goes beyond just telling you what to do. It actually helps you to understand the why behind those common security vulnerabilities that we often see.
Okay.
It provides this thing called a vulnerability lexicon.
A lexicon. That sounds a bit academic.
It might sound intimidating, but it's actually quite user-friendly. Think of it as a categorized list of common coding errors
Okay.
that can lead to security vulnerabilities.
Got it.
And then it goes a step further by organizing these vulnerabilities into a taxonomy.
Okay. So it's more than just a list. It's like a structured way of understanding vulnerabilities.
Right.
What are some of the categories in this taxonomy?
They categorize vulnerabilities based on the type of problem when it's most likely to be introduced during the development process and the potential consequences if it is exploited.
I see.
So it really helps you to understand the why behind the vulnerability,
That's fascinating.
which is key to preventing them in the first place.
Yeah, that's super helpful.
So yeah, it's a practical resource for developers.
Yeah, especially those who might be new to secure coding practices.
Absolutely.
Now, the chapter mentions that KLSP offers different views, which sounds a little abstract. What's the purpose of these views?
Well, they provide different perspectives on how to integrate security into the SDLC. They're like lenses through which you can look at the process. But what I think is at the heart of a CLASP and where we should really focus our attention are the 7 key best practices it outlines.
Okay, best practices. Let's hear them.
The first one emphasizes the importance of instituting awareness programs. So this means educating everyone on the team, not just the security specialists,
Right.
about security concerns. Have you seen any security awareness programs that have been particularly effective?
I have. It's amazing how even simple initiatives can make a big difference. One organization I know, they introduced a security champion program where developers would volunteer to become experts on specific security topics, and then they would share their knowledge with their teams, maybe through like brown bag lunches or informal workshops. And it really boosted the overall security awareness, but it also created a sense of ownership and responsibility within the team.
That's fantastic. It really highlights the power of peer-to-peer learning and building that culture of security from within.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, what about the second best practice?
The second one focuses on performing application assessments to find and address vulnerabilities. before they become major headaches.
So it's not just about building security in, but it's about actively looking for weaknesses and fixing them proactively.
Exactly. The earlier you can catch these vulnerabilities, the easier and less costly they are to fix.
Right, that makes sense.
And CLASP provides guidance on a range of different assessment techniques, from code reviews and automated testing to penetration testing, where ethical hackers try to find vulnerabilities before the bad guys do.
That's really interesting. Speaking of building in security, what's next?
Well, the third best practice is all about capturing security requirements. And this one is critical because it emphasizes treating security requirements with the same level of importance as any other functional requirement.
So security shouldn't be an afterthought or something you just tack on at the end.
Exactly. It needs to be baked into the project plan from the very beginning.
Right, from the get-go.
And CLASP recommends using techniques like threat modeling to proactively identify potential security threats
I've heard of that.
and vulnerabilities early on.
Early in the design phase.
Yeah, exactly.
For those who might not be familiar with threat modeling, can you give us a quick rundown?
Sure. You put yourself in the mindset of an attacker, and you try to identify all the ways that they might try to exploit your application. By anticipating those attacks, you can design mitigations into your system from the ground up, making it much more difficult for attackers to succeed.
I like that. Think like the enemy, to stay one step ahead.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered awareness programs, assessments, and security requirements. What's next?
The fourth best practice focuses on implementing secure development practices throughout the coding process.
Okay.
So this is where the rubber really meets the road, where security is actually embedded in the DNA of your code.
This seems like a no-brainer, but I imagine it's easier said than done.
Yeah.
How does CLASP help teams to actually implement these practices effectively?
Well, CLASP provides a wealth of resources, including secure coding guidelines, cheat sheets, even training materials. That can help developers write code that is resistant to attacks. It encourages the use of security-focused libraries and frameworks, and it really emphasizes the importance of avoiding those common coding errors that can lead to vulnerabilities.
So it's like having a security coach right there with you,
Like,
guiding you towards the best practices,
throughout the whole development process.
helping you avoid common pitfalls.
And it's not just about the code itself. It's also about setting up secure development environments, using version control systems properly, and establishing secure coding standards that are consistently applied across the team.
So it's like a holistic approach to security, addressing both the technical and the procedural aspects of development.
Precisely.
I like it. But what happens when, despite our best efforts, vulnerabilities do slip through the cracks?
That's where the fifth best practice comes in. Building vulnerability remediation procedures.
Okay.
So CLASP acknowledges that perfection is elusive, right?
Yeah.
And it's essential to have a plan in place for when things inevitably go wrong.
So it's not just about preventing them, but it's about having a well-defined incident response plan
Precisely.
for when they occur.
It's about establishing a clear process for reporting,
Yeah.
assessing, and remediating vulnerabilities as quickly and efficiently as possible. This might involve setting up a dedicated security team, implementing a vulnerability tracking system, or even establishing service-level agreements, SLAs, for how quickly vulnerabilities need to be addressed.
So it's like having a fire drill for security incidents. So everyone knows what to do and can respond quickly and effectively.
It's a great analogy. And just like with fire drills, regular practice and testing are key.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've covered awareness, assessments, requirements, secure coding, and remediation. What's next?
The sixth best practice emphasizes the importance of defining and monitoring metrics
Metrics.
to
Okay.
track your progress
Yeah.
and measure the effectiveness of your security efforts.
So this is where we see if all the hard work is actually paying off. What kind of metrics does CLASP recommend tracking?
Well, CLASP emphasizes choosing metrics that are meaningful for your organization and can help you identify areas for improvement. This could include things like the number of vulnerabilities discovered during different stages of development, the time it takes to remediate those vulnerabilities, or even the percentage of code that has been reviewed for security issues.
So it's not just about collecting data. It's about using that data to make informed decisions and drive continuous improvement.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered 6 out of 7. What's the last one?
The seventh and final best practice is publishing operational security guidelines
Okay.
to ensure that your software remains secure even after it's been deployed.
So it's not just about building secure software. It's about keeping it secure out there in the real world.
You're absolutely right. It's an ongoing process.
Yeah.
These operational security guidelines provide clear guidance to your operations team on how to configure, monitor, and maintain your software in a secure manner. This might involve documenting firewall rules, intrusion detection system settings, or even procedures for patching vulnerabilities.
It's like handing over the security baton from the development team to the operations team,
Exactly.
ensuring a smooth transition and continued vigilance.
It's a collaborative effort,
Yeah.
with both teams working together to ensure that security remains a top priority.
Throughout the entire software lifecycle.
Yes.
This has been a really great overview of CLASP's 7 key best practices. It seems like a really comprehensive framework for building security into every stage of the development process. But I'm curious, how does CLASP actually go beyond these high-level best practices?
That's where the real magic happens. CLASP doesn't just stop at principles, it provides concrete guidance on how to put these best practices into action.
Okay.
And that's what we'll be diving into next.
I can't wait. This is where it gets really interesting. Seeing how CLASP translates theory into practice.
Exactly. We've laid out these 7 best practices, and they might seem pretty straightforward at first glance. But the real challenge, and I'm sure you can relate to this, is actually translating those principles into concrete actions within your specific development environment.
Absolutely. It's one thing to understand the what of CLASP, but the how is where things can get a little bit tricky.
Exactly.
Especially when you're dealing with existing workflows, legacy systems, and that ever-present pressure to deliver software quickly.
Exactly.
So let's roll up our sleeves and dig into the practicalities a bit here. Now remember those roadmaps we touched upon earlier?
Yeah.
CLASP offers 2 main paths, Greenfield for new projects and Legacy for existing software.
Right.
And each roadmap provides a tailored set of steps, recognizing that starting from scratch versus adapting existing systems requires different approaches.
Exactly.
So let's say we're dealing with a brand new project, a greenfield. What are some of the initial steps that CLASP recommends in that scenario?
Well, the Greenfield Roadmap really guides you through building that security foundation from the ground up. And one of the early steps focuses on establishing a clear understanding of the operational environment.
Okay.
So that means defining things like where your software is going to be deployed, who's going to have access to it, and what kind of data it's going to be handling.
That makes sense. Security is all about context, right?
Yeah.
You need to understand the environment in which your software will operate in order to identify potential threats and vulnerabilities effectively.
And once you have a grasp of that operational context, then CLASP guides you towards identifying resources and trust boundaries.
Okay.
So this step involves determining which parts of your system are the most critical and require the highest level of protection.
It's like building a fortress. You need to know where the weakest points are so you can reinforce them accordingly.
That's a great analogy. And this step is crucial because it helps you to prioritize your security efforts.
Right. You can't protect everything equally. So you really want to focus on those most critical assets.
Precisely.
So we've got our roadmap chosen. We've defined our operational environment. We've identified our critical assets. What's next?
Now it's time to start weaving those 7 best practices we discussed earlier into the fabric of your development process.
Okay.
So remember our conversation about security awareness programs?
Yes.
Well, in the Greenfield Roadmap, this best practice takes center stage right from the start.
Okay, so are there any other approaches CLASP recommends for building that security-first culture?
Well, CLASP suggests incorporating security awareness into existing training programs or onboarding processes.
Okay.
And it also encourages the use of gamification or incentives to make security training more engaging and encourage active participation.
Right, make it fun.
Exactly.
So it's not just a checkbox on a to-do list.
The key is to make it part of the team's DNA.
A habit.
Exactly.
Something that's ingrained in the way they think and operate. And then, once you've laid that foundation of awareness, you can move on to implementing some of the other best practices like application assessments and capturing security requirements.
Right, exactly.
But how does CLASP guide the implementation of those practices within the context of a new project?
Well, for application assessments, CLASP encourages integrating security testing into the development process from the very beginning.
Oh, wow.
So this could involve using static analysis tools to span code for potential vulnerabilities, setting up automated security tests as part of your continuous integration pipeline, or even conducting regular code reviews with a focus on security.
So it's about catching them early and often,
Exactly.
rather than waiting until the end of the development cycle.
And when it comes to capturing security requirements, CLASP emphasizes the importance of using techniques like threat modeling to proactively identify potential threats and vulnerabilities during the design phase.
Okay.
And these security requirements are then documented alongside functional requirements, ensuring that security is treated as an integral part of the project from the outset.
So it's not just a separate task that's tacked on at the end.
Exactly.
It's a core consideration throughout the whole life cycle.
And this is where CLASP's structured approach really shines. It provides clear guidance on how to integrate security into each phase of the SDLC, from requirements gathering and design to coding, testing, and deployment.
I bet that level of detail is really helpful for teams who are new to this.
It definitely is. CLASP doesn't just tell you what to do. It provides specific examples, templates, resources that you can use to implement these best practices effectively within your own development environment.
It's like having a security playbook,
Exactly.
guiding you through each step of the process.
And the Greenfield Roadmap is just one example of how CLASP provides practical guidance for implementing these best practices. The Legacy Roadmap offers a similarly structured approach, tailored specifically for adapting existing software to meet those modern security standards.
So whether you're starting from scratch or dealing with legacy systems, CLASP has you covered. It's a very flexible framework that can be tailored to your specific needs and context.
But let's not forget about those potential challenges we touched upon earlier.
Oh, right.
Implementing any new methodology, even one as well-structured as CLASP, can come with its own set of hurdles.
Right, we can't just assume that everything is going to go smoothly.
Right.
What are some of the common roadblocks organizations might encounter when they're trying to implement 2LSSP?
Well, one of the biggest hurdles, especially for larger organizations, is just resistance to change.
Yeah, it's that classic "we've always done it this way" mentality. I imagine that can be pretty frustrating when you're trying to champion a new approach like this.
It definitely can be. It's understandable to a certain extent. Change can be disruptive, especially when people are already under pressure
Right,
to meet deadlines and deliver software quickly.
for sure.
But I think the key to overcoming that resistance is really focusing on communication and education.
So it's not just about telling people this is how we're doing things now, but it's about explaining the why behind the change and demonstrating the value it can bring.
Exactly. It's about clearly articulating those benefits, not just in terms of improved security, but also reduced risk, and ultimately delivering higher quality software.
Right. It's about connecting those security improvements to tangible outcomes that matter
Exactly.
to the team and to the organization as a whole.
At the end of the day, security is everyone's responsibility.
Right.
It's not just a task for the security team. It needs to be embedded in the culture of the entire organization.
And that takes time and effort, right? It's not something you can achieve overnight.
Absolutely not.
But I think those early wins, those success stories where CalSP clearly makes a difference, can be really powerful motivators.
For sure.
Have you seen that in your own work?
Absolutely. When teams see how CLASP can help them catch those critical vulnerabilities early on, or how it can streamline their security testing efforts, they really become believers.
Yeah.
It's those tangible results that make the biggest difference.
It's about showing, not just telling. But even with buy-in, there's still the practical matter of resources. Time, budget, skilled personnel, those are all finite.
Right.
And security, while crucial, might not always be at the top of the priority list.
Right.
How do you address those resource constraints when you're trying to implement something as comprehensive as CLASP?
That's another major challenge, especially for organizations that are already stretched thin. But the good news is that CLASP is designed to be adaptable.
Okay.
And that includes adapting to resource limitations.
So it's not an all-or-nothing proposition.
Exactly.
You can start small and then scale gradually as resources become available.
Exactly. It's about prioritizing those best practices and activities that are going to have the biggest impact on your security posture, given your current resources. You don't have to implement everything all at once.
It's about finding that balance between ambition and pragmatism, focusing on the areas where you can get the most bang for your buck.
Exactly. And it's also important to leverage automation wherever possible. Integrating security testing tools into your development pipeline can really help you do more with less, freeing up that valuable time and resources for those other critical tasks.
Yeah. Automation's like having an extra set of hands, right?
Exactly.
Tirelessly working in the background to improve your security posture.
But even with the best tools and processes in place, there's still that human element to consider.
Oh, for sure.
People are ultimately responsible for implementing CLASP and ensuring its effectiveness.
Right.
And one of the biggest challenges I've seen is ensuring that developers fully embrace the methodology and make it a part of their daily work.
Yeah, it goes back to that cultural shift we talked about, making security everyone's responsibility, not just something that's delegated to a separate security team.
Exactly. And that requires ongoing training, education, and support. You need to equip developers with the knowledge and the skills they need
Yeah.
to build secure software and empower them to make security a priority in their work.
Create an environment where it's not seen as a burden, but as an enabler,
Exactly.
right? Where they feel confident and supported in their efforts to build secure software.
And that's where those awareness programs we discussed earlier play such a crucial role.
Right.
It's not just about teaching developers about specific vulnerabilities or security tools. It's about fostering that mindset where security is considered an integral part of the development process.
Building a culture of security
Exactly.
where everyone understands the importance of their role in protecting the organization.
It's a journey, not a destination.
Absolutely.
It takes time, effort, and commitment from everyone involved, but the rewards are well worth it. More secure software, reduced risk, and a stronger, more resilient organization.
This has been a fantastic deep dive into Kali SP. We've explored the core concepts, the practical steps, and the potential challenges along the way.
It's been a pleasure diving deep with you. I hope this has equipped our listeners with the knowledge and inspiration to embark on their own Kali SP journey.
And remember, CLASP is a flexible framework. It's not about blindly following rules, but finding what works for you. So go forth and explore, experiment, find what works for your organization. And keep in mind, building secure software is an ongoing journey. Stay curious, stay vigilant, and never stop learning.